The wind bit through the morning like a blade, cutting across the high Wyoming plains where nothing grew but thistle and regret. Smoke lingered faintly in the air from the night's fire, curling from the cold ashes behind the lone wagon that moved slow and stubborn up the narrow ridge. The wagon creaked under its own weight, half-covered canvas, a rattling pot clanking beneath the axle, and a rifle strapped to the side like a bone to brittle skin. At the reins sat Clara Vance, her face half hidden beneath a weather-beaten hat, eyes hardened by years of survival, not age. She was 34, but carried the silence of someone much older. Her boots were dust-choked. Her hands, gloved in worn leather, never stopped moving, steering, searching, surviving. Behind her, the vast emptiness stretched on, miles of wind-warped rock and prairie that had taken her husband, her farm, and almost her faith. Ahead, the land climbed into the hills, where snow still lingered on shadowed slopes and the sky turned to steel when storms brewed. The wagon wasn't just carrying dried meat, flour sacks, and rope. It held everything Clara had left, memory, guilt, and a name. She'd been heading west since spring thaw, avoiding roads, towns, and men, especially men. They stared too long, or too short. They asked too much or nothing at all. Trust was a luxury she'd buried along with Daniel Vance, who died in a uniform fighting a war that never ended. Her last kiss to him was at the station, her last words, "Come back whole." What returned had been a box, draped in stars and swallowed by date. Now, she moved not with purpose but with necessity. There was no final destination marked on her mental map, only the understanding that as she kept going, maybe she'd outrun the hollow in her chest. Maybe. The mule pulling the wagon, she called him Crow, was slow but steady. Unlike the men who once filled her life, Crow didn't break promises. He didn't speak lies with his teeth. He simply pulled. The ridge narrowed ahead, and Clara's instincts prickled. She stopped the wagon, listening. No wind now. No birds. Just silence, too perfect to be natural. She dismounted slowly, hand brushing the butt of her rifle. Something in the air had shifted, like the earth itself was holding its breath. A rustle behind the wagon. Not loud, not fast, but careless enough to be human. She spun, rifle up, already pulling breath through clenched teeth. From behind a mesquite tree emerged a man, sunburned, lean to the point of starvation, clothes hanging on him like wet rags on a scarecrow. His beard was patchy, jaw tight, one eye bloodshot. He raised both hands, palm out. He rasped, "I don't mean no harm." Clara didn't lower the rifle. "You're standing awful close for a man who don't mean harm," she said, eyes locked on his hands, his belt, his boots. He stepped forward, wobbling slightly. "I'm just hungry." His voice cracked like old timber. 3 days I ain't eaten. I saw your fire last night, kept my distance. You're still brayer thin. That was your first mistake. He gave a short laugh, no humor in it. "That's fair." For a moment, the only sound was wind returning, gentle, brushing through dried weeds like fingers over brittle bones. Clara studied him. His shirt was torn, one sleeve missing. The revolver on his hip was rusted, untouched. If he meant to kill, he'd have done it already. Still, she kept the rifle raised. "You got a name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Jed." She looked at him sideways. "Jed what?" He blinked. "Jed Hartley. Used to run cattle out near Fort McKee." "Used to." He nodded once. "Until they died. One by one. Then the land dried up. Then the bank came." His voice tightened. "Then the buzzards." "Sounds like a common story," Clara said flatly. "I suppose it is." Her eyes narrowed. "And what makes you think you can take from me what the land didn't own?" Jed lowered his hands slowly. "I didn't come to take," he said. "But I might, if that's what it takes not to die." And there it was. Clara didn't flinch. "Then I hope you're faster than you look." Jed stared at her, not in challenge, not in fear, in shame. "I ain't proud," he muttered. "I didn't say you were." Silence again. Then, slowly, she lowered the rifle. Just a little. Just enough. She reached into the wagon and tossed a wrapped cloth toward him. It hit the dirt between them. He didn't move at first. Then, wordless, he knelt and opened it. Jerky, a hard biscuit, half an apple gone soft. He devoured it with the desperation of a man remembering what food even was. She watched. No pity in her stare, only calculation. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with his sleeve and looked up. "Thank you." Clara stepped forward. Her rifle was still in her grip, casual now, like a warning resting in the wind. "You forgot one thing," she said quietly. He blinked, confused. "What's that?" "My honor." Jed's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You came to rob me, and I let you, but you forgot what that meant. What it costs." He stood slowly. "I didn't forget. I just figured you'd rather lose food than spill blood." "I would," Clara said. "But make no mistake, I would spill it." He nodded, then turned slightly as if to walk away. Clara called out, "You got anywhere to be?" Jed stopped. "Not in the mall." "Then you're gonna help me cross that ridge." He looked back. "Why?" "Because I fed you. Because you owe me. Because I don't want to get ambushed by the next man too weak to starve with dignity." She climbed back on the wagon seat. "And because if you're gonna rob me, you're damn well gonna earn it." Jed didn't move right away. Then, with a shrug that might have been acceptance or maybe surrender, he followed. The ridge climb was rough. Crows strained at the reins, hooves slipping in loose shale. Jed walked beside him, one hand on the yoke, muttering encouragement under his breath. Clara watched from the seat, rifle in her lap, eyes never still. She didn't trust him. Not fully, but she trusted the hunger in his belly more than any oath. They made camp by Crooked Creek at sunset, fire small and smokeless. Jed cleaned the fish they caught. Clara stitched a tear in her coat. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Jed broke the silence. "I had a daughter," he said. Clara didn't respond. Her name was May. She died last winter. Fever took her fast. He poked the fire, buried her in the snow, couldn't even dig proper, just covered her up and waited for spring. Clara stared into the flames. "You talk like it's a wound that never closes." Jed looked at her. "Is there any other kind?" She nodded once. Then, "My husband died in Georgia. Some hill with no name. The letter said heroic. All I know is he never came home. And neither did I." Their eyes met, not in shared pain, but in shared recognition. "Why you still going west?" Jed asked. Clara exhaled. "Because east ain't got nothing but ghosts." A coyote howled in the distance. Then another. The fire cracked. Neither reached for weapons. Some threats weren't worth fearing. In the morning, Clara woke early, boots crunching for us as she checked the mule, the axles, the supplies. Jed sat nearby, sharpening a stick into a point, eyes wary. "You think I'm still gonna rob you?" he asked. Clara didn't smile. "You already did." He looked down. "And you still fed me. You still breathing, aren't you?" He stood, stretching stiff limbs. "What happens after the ridge?" Clara checked the sky. "We reached the prairie flat, then on to Dry Creek Pass. If the snow hasn't blocked it. You expect company. You expect company." She hesitated. "I expect the worst, and hope for less." Jed nodded. "You always talk like that." "Only when I'm right." As they mounted the wagon again, Clara caught sight of something in the distance. Riders. 3 of them, maybe more, just shadows on a far ridge. Watching. Waiting. She didn't point it out. Instead, she snapped the reins. The wagon creaked into motion. Behind them, dust rose. And far ahead, the wind whispered through the trees like a warning that hadn't yet decided its form. They rode on, not as strangers in the mall, but not yet as allies. The first raindrops fell like warnings, slow, heavy, deliberate. They struck the canvas roof of Clara's wagon with dull thuds, each one a herald of the storm pressing down from the northwest. Bristleback Ridge loomed ahead like a sleeping beast, jagged and unforgiving, its peak hidden beneath rolling clouds that flashed with distant lightning. The wind had turned strange, curling in sudden gusts that stirred the wagon cover and rattled loose tools. Clara scanned the sky, her face unreadable, save for the tightening of her jaw. There wasn't much daylight left, and that ridge was the only path forward. Jed stood beside her at the front of the wagon, squinting into the storm. "It's coming fast," he muttered. Clara didn't respond. She was listening to the wind again. She always did that before deciding. It had never lied to her. "I know," she finally said. "We pushed through." Jed looked at her like she was mad. "That slope's narrow as a mule's spine. Rain hits harder and you won't see the trail. One wrong turn and we go off the edge." "I'll take straight drops over ambushes," she replied. "I don't like what's been following us." Jed hesitated, then nodded. He'd seen the shadows too. Those distant riders hadn't vanished. They were waiting for something. Clara didn't intend to give it to them. Crow, the mule, let out a snort of protest as they pressed forward, hooves sinking into softening soil. The climb was slow, brutal. The wheels churned into the mud with a grinding squeal, resisting the weight of their world. Rain thickened, rolling in sheets, turning out to slurry. Thunder cracked once, then again, closer. Jed slipped, caught himself on the wagon frame, and cursed under his breath. "You ever think maybe this land just wants us dead?" Clara didn't answer. She just leaned forward, coaxing the mule with a whisper that barely reached over the wind. Crow obeyed, stubborn as his mistress. The ridge trail narrowed. One side fell into a gulch choke with black pines and jagged boulders. The other rose in a sheer wall of limestone. There was no turning back, no room to stop. Suddenly, a wheel caught a groove. The wagon tilted violently. Clara shouted. Jed leapt, throwing his weight against the wagon's side. For a breathless moment, the world held its breath. Then the wheel thudded back into place. Jed gasped, his shirt soaked through, hair plastered to his face. "We need to stop, just till it lets up." Clara turned to him. Rain slid down her face, but her voice cut through it, low and firm. "We stop, we slide. We move, we might make it." Jed wanted to argue, but he saw the steel in her eyes, the same look she'd had the day she fed him instead of shooting him. That wasn't stubbornness. It was survival. They moved. At the ridge peak, the storm struck in full. Wind howled like something alive. Trees bent sideways. Lightning forked just beyond the rise, revealing the twisting trail below. Clara pulled the reins, her knuckles white. Then Crow screamed, a strange, high sound, his legs skidding on the mud. The wagon lurched sideways, dragged by the mule's weight. Jed lunged forward, grabbing the harness. He planted his boots, digging in, trying to steady the beast. Clara jumped from the seat, boots splashing into the muck. She unlatched the front strap, freeing Crow. The mule stumbled forward, nearly dragging Jed with him. "Let go," she shouted. "I got him." Jed roared back, but Crow bucked, frantic, tearing free. Jed hit the ground hard, mud in his teeth. The wagon groaned, then tipped sideways into the ditch, axle cracking. Supplies spilled. Sacks, tools, a small tin box with Clara's last photograph fluttering open before vanishing in the wind. They sat in the rain for several long seconds. The silence was louder than the storm. Jed wiped his mouth and looked up. That could have gone better. Clara stood still, watching the trail behind them. He followed her gaze. From below, two shapes on horseback crept up the muddy slope, barely visible through the curtain of rain. "They are still coming," he said. Clara's eyes narrowed. "They don't quit." "Then neither do we." They dragged what they could from the wreck. Blankets, the rifle, a half-empty bag of flour. The wagon was useless now. So was Crow, who had limped down the other side, vanishing into the mist. Clara didn't call after him. Instead, they moved on foot. By twilight, the storm had passed, leaving only the steam of wet earth and broken trees. The land felt hollow, quiet. Bristleback's lower pass opened into a narrow valley where moss clung to stone, and birdsong returned, tentative. A small clearing gave them shelter beneath a low overhang. Jed gathered wood from a fallen pine and sparked a small fire. Clara tended her rifle, drying the powder pack and wiping water from the bowl with the sleeve of her coat. He watched her for a while. Then, "You always this calm." She didn't look up. "Only when I'm terrified." He smirked. "Well, that makes two of us." The fire crackled. Jed sat close, warming his hands. Clara unwrapped a strip of meat. She handed him half. No poison in it, he joked. Not the kind you'd feel right away. He took it anyway. They ate in silence. Only the fire spoke. After a while, Jed leaned back against the rock. You ever wonder what's left of us if we stop moving? Clara stayed into the flame. Dust! That's what I'm scared of. Not death. Not getting shot or starving. Just being forgotten, like none of it ever mattered. She nodded slowly. Then make it matter. Jed tilted his head. How? Start by not robbing folks. He laughed. It echoed oddly in the small cove. You're a hard one, Clara Vance. She turned to him. And you're a man who ain't sure whether he wants to live. He blinked. The words hit deeper than expected. The firelight caught something beyond the trees. A flicker. A shape. Clara's hand moved to the rifle. Jed saw it too. They stood, silent, alert. Then a voice, low, deliberate, cut through the trees. You make too much noise. From the shadows stepped a man. Not tall, not bulky, but he moved like the wind. Quiet, sure, dangerous. He wore fur stitched with bone. His face was scarred, a feather tied in his braid. His eyes, dark, steady, took them in without flinching. Jed raised his hands. Friend or ghost? The man didn't blink. Depends who you ask. Clara didn't lower the rifle. You've been tracking us. He nodded once. Not hard. Your wagon sings a loud song. Why? The stranger stepped closer. Because others follow you. Red Hollow. Jed stiffened. You sure? The man gestured with a tilt of his chin. Their marks are on trees south of the ridge. Fresh. They move in groups of 5. You got 2 days, maybe less. Clara lowered the rifle slowly. You know them. I know what they do. He sat by the fire without asking. I've seen what they leave behind. Jed watched him cautiously. You got a name. Mika. That was all he said. Clara studied him. There was weight in his presence, like old stone. Mika's silence wasn't emptiness. It was experience. She looked at him. Why warn us? Mika shrugged. Because sometimes the land chooses who walks it, and you're still walking. Jed sat down again, the tension easing a fraction. You help us. Mika didn't answer right away. Then, I help the land. You're on it. That's close enough. As the night deepened, the 3 sat in a triangle of flickering light and growing trust. No loud promises. No plan spoken aloud. Clara reached into her coat, pulled out a folded scrap, old paper. A map. She flattened it on a rock. Jed and Mika leaned in. There's a pass here, she said, pointing. Dry creek. If we can reach it, we might outpace them. Mika nodded. They'll block the main trail. We take the river bend. Through ash fields. Jed raised a brow. Ash fields. Old burn, Mika explained. 10 miles of stumps and black ground. Hard to breathe. Harder to track. Clara smiled faintly. Sound like our kind of place. She rolled the map again. The fire dimmed. Mika stood. We leave at first light. He walked to the edge of the clearing, then stopped. Don't talk too loud. This place remembers voices. Then he was gone. Jed exhaled slowly. You trust him? Clara didn't answer, because she wasn't sure yet. But for now, she was alive. And that was enough. The air smelled of ash and pine needles, carried on a breeze that whispered warnings no one had time to hear. Clara knelt to the edge of the blackened field. The ground beneath her boots scorched from a fire that must have passed through seasons ago, yet still refused to be forgotten. Soot clung to her gloves as she traced her fingers along the bark of a dead stump. The silence was deep here, unnatural, even. No birds, no breeze through leaves. Just the creak of old branches and the faint crackle of coal dust beneath their feet. Behind her, Jed adjusted the strap of his rifle, eyes scanning the distance, always moving. Beside him, Mika crouched low, one hand pressed to the earth, as if listening. Clara watched the 2 of them, the unlikely allies she had never asked for, and yet here they were, shadowing her steps through the valley of death. The Red Hollow gang was not far behind now. Mika's track showed their movements 2 hours behind, maybe less. Too close for mistakes. They'll take the canyon trail, Mika murmured. They think like wolves, funnel their prey toward narrow places. We turn through the basin, strike from behind. Jed didn't look convinced. 3 against 8? That's a prayer without a god. Clara stood, brushing soot from her knees. Then we become ghosts. Quiet ones. Mika nodded approvingly. Ghosts leave no blood to follow. They moved fast and low, weaving between the charred remains of what had once been forest. Each tree was a skeletal hand reaching skyward in agony, each footstep stirring old ash into the wind. Clara's breath came shallow. Her shoulder ached from the fall on bristleback ridge. The bandage under her coat soaked red again. But she didn't mention it. Pain wasn't special anymore. It was just something she wore, like boots or burden. They reached the edge of the ash field by midday, where a narrow bluff curved above a shallow canyon. Below, red hollows camped sprawled along the river bend, their horses tethered loose, rifles leaned on wagon wheels, and fire smoke curling like a signal to anyone bold, or foolish, enough to answer. Clara lay on her belly, eyes narrowed. 8 men, one of them's Elias Vane. Jed stiffened. You sure? She didn't blink. He's the one who burned our land. I remember his hands. Scar on the left. Rope brand on the neck. Jed studied her face. You said you lost your farm to a banker. I did. Then Vane burned what the bank didn't take. She rolled onto her back, staring at the gray sky above. Daniel was already gone. But that place, it was where we promised to grow old. Vane turned it to cinders. Took what little I had left. Mika crouched beside them. You want revenge? Clara exhaled slowly. I want him to look me in the eye before he dies. They made their plan without ceremony. Mika would draw 2 of the gang into the woods under pretense of stolen horses. Jed would flank the right ridge and cut off any escape. Clara would wait until Elias stepped away from the fire, then approach from the center. It was bold. It was foolish. It was the only path forward. As they separated, Jed touched her arm gently. You don't have to do this alone. She didn't smile. That's the point. The wind picked up again. Leaves spiraled through the burnt air like falling embers. Clara descended the bluff slowly, her coat blending with the terrain, her steps soft but sure. Down below, the outlaws laughed, their backs to her, unaware that the storm they'd stirred had finally come for them. Mika's distraction came sharp and sudden, a horse's scream, then 2 startled shouts. Elias stood, cursed, and motioned 2 men to check the commotion. Clara used a moment to cross the open stretch, slipping behind a wagon. She held her breath. The revolver in her hand felt heavier than it should. Her boots were caked in soot. Every second thundered louder than the last. Then he toned. Elias Vane, taller than she remembered, grayer, but still carrying himself like a man untouchable. His eyes were pale, almost glossy, a snake who'd never shed the smell of smoke. Clara stepped out. He saw her, frowned, confused. You. She raised a gun. Move and I'll paint the wagon with what's left of your soul, she said, voice steady. His hands lifted slowly, fingers twitching. Now wait a minute. Like you waited when we begged for mercy, when you stood over our well and poured kerosene into it. His eyes narrowed. That was just business. No, Clara whispered. This is... He lunged faster than she expected, knocked her wrist. The gun fired wild, hit a tree. Her shoulder burned as she stumbled. He grabbed a knife from his belt and swung. She ducked, drove her knee into his gut. He gasped but didn't fall. They grappled. Dust flew. Her revolver hit the date, spinning away. Elias slammed her back against the wagon, grinning. I remember you now, he hissed. You were the one with the preacher's husband. Real soft man. She spat in his face. He reeled, wiped his cheek, raised a knife. A shot cracked. Elias jerked, chest blooming red. Jed stood behind them, smoking rifle in hand. Elias dropped to his knees, wheezing. Clara stepped forward. He dies by me, she said. Jed didn't argue. He just stepped back. Clara knelt beside Elias, meeting his failing eyes. This is for the ones you forgot. For every name you didn't bother to remember. She pressed the barrel to his chest and pulled the trigger. It was over in a heartbeat. Gunfire rang out elsewhere. Mika cried something in a language Clara didn't know. Then silence. One of the red hollow men tried to flee downriver. Jed's second shot dropped him. The others scattered like rats from flame. When the dust settled, 5 bodies lay still. One horse bolted into the canyon. The river ran red in streaks where blood met water. Mika returned, panting, "I'm scraped but alive." He nodded once, then sat under a tree, closing his eyes like he'd just finished burying someone. Clara limped over to where Jed stood. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "You get what you needed?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I got what was owed." They gathered what they could. Ammunition. A few supplies. Food. Then they set fire to what remained. Mika poured lamp oil over the gang's gear, their tent, even Elias's coat. Clara lit the match. The blaze caught quickly. As the flames reached the sky, she stood there, watching, face unreadable. Jed came beside her. "You think it's really done now?" "No," she said, "but it's a start." By nightfall, they'd made camp near a bend in the creek, far from the burning remains. Stars returned overhead. Owls called in the dark. Clara sat beside the fire, cradling her bandaged arm. Mika slept near the edge, wrapped in his blanket like a shadow. Jed was quiet, sharpening his knife with a rock. After a long silence, he spoke. "You ever think about where you'll stop?" Clara didn't look up. "No." He nodded slowly. "I was thinking maybe I'd try down south. Heard the rains come kinda there." She finally met his eyes. "Why tell me?" "Because if you wanted company for a while, I'd offer mine." Clara studied him. The man who once tried to rob her. The man who had saved her life. Twice. The man who understood that sometimes silence was worth more than words. She shook her head gently. "I'm not going south." Jed smiled faintly. "Then I'll ride on in the morning." "Do that." A long pause. He rose, dusted his coat. "Why'd you feed me that day?" Clara turned back to the fire. "Because someone once reminded me who I was before the fire." He didn't press her. He just nodded and walked into the trees, a shadow swallowed by night. By dawn, only Clara and Mika remained. The fire was ash. The sky was gray. She rolled her coat, slung her rifle, and nodded toward the trail. Mika fell into step beside her. "Where now?" he asked. "Where the road goes quiet," she replied. As they vanished into the haze of the new day, the wind rose behind them, whispering through the trees and the rocks and the rivers, carrying not just memory, but something else. Something like honor. Something that couldn't be taken. Not anymore. And in her silence, Clara Vance walked on.